My letters disappeared, and you just erased me from existence? Who signed this?
Don't ask questions you're not ready to hear the answers to.
After listening, please subscribe, hit like, and leave a comment before the continuation. The sun hung over the desert like a molten ball that knew no mercy. Sand, lifted by the hot wind, grated under boots and packed into every crack, into eyes, into lungs, into thoughts. The American military base, lost somewhere in the Middle East, looked like a small island of order amid the chaos of dunes, but that order was as fragile as promises made before a fight. In a cramped tent that smelled of sweat and metal, Jack Riley sat on a cot, holding a yellowed sheet of paper. His fingers, roughened by the rifle and the sand, gripped the pencil gently, as if one careless motion could snap it. Jack, a 24-year-old Marine from Texas, looked like a man the war had not yet broken, but had already taken a bite out of. His fair hair, once neatly combed, was now tousled and dusted with sand. The blue eyes that once laughed at parties in Austin now stared into nothing whenever he wasn't writing. But the moment the pencil touched paper, a spark lit in them, a memory of Emily, his fiancée, who waited, or was she still waiting? Thousands of miles away by Lake Travis, where they used to walk hand in hand and laugh at dumb jokes about cowboys and cacti. He wrote to her every day. It had become a ritual, almost a prayer, in a world where the only sounds were the rumble of armored carriers and the whistle of bullets. The words came unevenly, sometimes rushed, sometimes with pauses when Jack stopped to wipe sweat from his brow or listen for a distant explosion. Emily, today we crossed the desert again. The sun burns so hard it feels like my skin is cracking. But I think of you. Remember how we sat by the lake and you laughed when I tried to grab a fish with my bare hands? I can still hear your laugh. He wrote about love, not the sweet kind from the movies, but the kind that kept him afloat with death, breathing down his neck. He didn't write about blood, about comrades' screams, about the time a bullet passed so close he felt its heat at his temple. That would have been too much not for her, but for himself. The tent hummed with muffled voices. Someone cleaned a weapon, someone cursed the heat, someone tried to sleep, but sleep here was as rare as rain in this damned desert. Jack folded the page in half, carefully, as if it were not just paper, but a piece of his heart. He stood, ducking so he wouldn't hit the low ceiling, and headed for Captain Lawson. The commander sat at an improvised desk, an ammo crate buried under maps and papers. Lawson was a tall, lean man with sharp features as if carved from stone. His gray eyes always seemed cold, even when he smiled, which was rare. "Captain, another letter," Jack said quietly, holding out the sheet. Lawson looked up, and for a moment Jack thought he saw something strange in those eyes, not just fatigue, but something deeper, darker. The captain only nodded, took the letter, and placed it on a stack of other papers. "I'll send it with the next mail run, Riley," he said, his voice as flat as the desert horizon. "Focus on tomorrow's patrol. Letters won't help you there." "Yes, sir," Jack replied, but Lawson's words left a faint residue in him. Why was the captain always so detached when it came to letters? Jack brushed the thought aside. War makes people hard, that's all. Lawson was probably just as tired as the rest of them. Back at his cot, Jack stared at the tent ceiling, where shadows from the kerosene lamp swayed like ghosts. He thought of Emily. Her long chestnut hair she always braided into a careless plait. Her laugh that sounded like little bells in the wind. Her promise to wait when he left for the war, and she held his hand at the Austin airport. But why wasn't she writing? It had been 3 months, no letter, not a word. Maybe the mail was lost. Maybe she was just busy. Or, Jack clenched his fists, pushing away the thought that she might have forgotten him, found someone else. No, not Emily, he whispered to himself, yet doubts, like sand, seeped through every crack. He took another sheet and started again. "Emily, I don't know if my letters are reaching you, but I write because it's the only thing that keeps me here. I picture you by the lake, reading a book, the wind playing with your hair. I will come back, I promise. Hold on to me, Emily. I will come back." He pressed hard on the last words, as if he could etch them into reality. But as he folded the letter, his fingers trembled. Why wasn't she answering? Were his words reaching her at all? That night, Jack lay awake, listening to distant blasts and the generators drone. In the tense dark, he heard a buddy whisper, "Mail here is a lottery, brother. Maybe your letters just got lost." Jack didn't believe in lotteries. He believed in Emily. Even so, when he closed his eyes, he didn't see her smiling face. He saw Lawson's cold stare, the captain holding his letter as if it weighed nothing. The next day on patrol, Jack noticed Lawson talking to another officer while holding a folder. A sheet slipped out and fell in the sand. Jack moved to pick it up, but Lawson snatched it off the ground. "That's not yours, Riley," he snapped, his voice sharper than usual. Jack nodded, but his heart pounded. He had caught a glimpse of his own handwriting, the same hand he used to write to Emily. In that moment, the desert felt hotter and the war closer. Jack returned to his duties, but the thought of that page wouldn't leave him. Something was wrong. Something hid behind Lawson's cold eyes, behind his promises to send the mail. Jack didn't yet know this war would take from him not only his peace, but the truth. The desert did not let go. Even at night, when the sun ducked below the horizon, the air on the American base stayed thick with heat and tension. Jack Riley sat on the edge of his cot, holding another sheet of paper, already wrinkled from his hesitant attempts to find the right words. The tent buzzed with sound. Someone coughed, someone clicked through a rifle magazine, metal clacking. In the distance, engines of armored personnel carriers rumbled as they readied for night patrol. Jack wrote to Emily, as he did every evening, but this time his hand shook more. 4 months without a reply. 4 months of silence that tore his heart deeper than any bullet. He leaned closer to the page, trying to gather his thoughts. "Emily, I don't know what's happening. Are you alive? Do you read my letters? Today we lost a guy on patrol. He was from Alabama, loved to talk about fishing. I don't want to scare you, but I need to know you're there." Jack stopped, squeezing the pencil until his knuckles went white. He didn't write at all how that Alabama boy's blood stained the sand, how the screams still rang in his ears. But he wrote because it was the only thing that kept him here in this hell where any day could be the last. "Riley, writing your novels again?" Private Garrett, a big man from Oklahoma, cut through the tense quiet. He sat across from Jack, cleaning his rifle with the care of a man tending his only friend. Jack forced a smile, crooked as it was. "You'd be better off writing your girl, Garrett. Maybe she wouldn't be bar hopping while you're out here." Garrett laughed, but a shadow flickered in his eyes. "Come on, man. Mail here is a black hole. My last package vanished somewhere between Baghdad and Oklahoma. You sure your letters to that Austin beauty are getting through?" Jack shrugged, but Garrett's words hit something inside. "I hope so. Captain Lawson promised to send them." "Lawson?" Garrett snorted, setting the rifle aside. "Guy's cold as a lizard on a rock. Wouldn't trust him with my ration bar." "Oh, quit it," another soldier, Juan, called from the next cot, flipping an old magazine. "Lawson's strict, but fair. War's gotten to him like it's gotten to all of us." Jack didn't answer. He folded the letter, sealed it, and headed to the captain's tent. The night was starless. Only the weak pool of the floodlights picked out armored silhouettes and soldiers smoking in the dark. Captain Lawson sat at his crate desk, looking through documents by lamplight. His face was as unreadable as ever, but this time Jack noticed how the captain quickly slipped a folder away when he entered. "Another one, Riley?" Lawson looked up, his even voice edged with irritation. "You writing a book?" "Just want her to know I'm alive, sir," Jack said, holding out the envelope. His voice was steady, but anxiety churned inside. Why was Lawson looking at him like that, weighing him, as if he knew something Jack didn't? Lawson took the letter, but didn't put it on the usual pile. He kept it in his hand, tapping the envelope with his fingers. "You know, Riley, war's not a place for romance. Focus on staying alive. Letters won't save her." "I'm not saving her, sir. I'm saving myself." The words came out faster than Jack could stop them. Lawson narrowed his eyes, but said nothing, only nodded as if dismissing him. Back in the tent, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Lawson wasn't just a strict commander. There was something in his words, in his stare, that set Jack's skin crawling. He tried to push the thought away, but it buzzed back like flies to trash. What if Garrett was right? What if the letters weren't getting through? The next night on patrol, Jack walked beside Garrett, rifle at the ready. The desert was quiet, a deceitful quiet like the pause before a blast. Garrett, as usual, tried to cut the tension. Listen, Jack, if your Emily isn't writing, maybe she's just busy. You know Austin festivals, barbecue, dancing. My sister says the girls love that stuff. She's not like that, Jack snapped, his voice unsteady. Emily promised to wait. She would have written. Garrett sighed and patted his shoulder. I'm not saying she's running around, but war, man, it changes everybody, us and the folks back home. The patrol ended without incident, but when they returned to base, Jack saw something odd. Lawson stood by the mail tent talking to an officer Jack had only seen once. They spoke quietly, but Jack caught the word letters and something about security. He stepped closer, and Lawson spun on him. Riley, what are you doing here? The captain's voice cut like a blade. Just checking if there's mail, sir, Jack lied, trying to look casual. Mail comes once a week. Get some sleep. Lawson turned back to the officer, but Jack saw the man tuck a folder behind his back. There were letters in it. Jack was sure he saw his own handwriting on one of the envelopes. He didn't sleep that night. Lying on the cot, he listened to the wind moan against the tent and thought of Emily. Her braid, her quiet laugh, the only things keeping him together. But her silence was choking him. He remembered Lawson's words, letters won't save her. What did he mean? And why was that envelope still in Lawson's hand instead of on a mail truck? In the morning, Jack decided to act. He went to Juan, who always seemed to know everything on base. Juan, you ever see Lawson actually take letters to the truck? I mean himself? Juan frowned, thinking. You know, I've seen him collect them. But sending them, not sure. I heard him arguing with someone in logistics once. Something about filtering correspondence. Didn't look into it. Filtering, Jack's heart kicked up. Why filter letters? Juan shrugged. Security, probably, or he's just paranoid. War man. Jack went back to his tent, but Juan's words wouldn't let him go. Filtering. Security. His letters to Emily, what could be dangerous about them? But Lawson's look, that envelope in his hand, the crack about romance, it all fit together like a puzzle Jack still didn't understand. He grabbed a new sheet and wrote again, but this time the words were different. Emily, if you're not getting my letters, I'll find a way to reach you. I promised I'd come back, and I will. He sealed the envelope, but didn't take it to Lawson. This time Jack slid the letter under his mattress. Something told him the captain couldn't be trusted. Austin greeted Jack Riley with heat that clung to the skin and the clamor of streets he once knew like the back of his hand. Now the city felt foreign, as if the war had scorched not only the desert but his past. He walked down Congress Avenue with an old army duffel on his shoulder. Inside were his belongings. A few unsent letters, a photo of Emily, and the shrapnel scar on his left arm, a reminder of the night he almost stayed in the sand forever. His boots thumped the asphalt, each step echoing in his chest with pain. He was going back to Emily, back to the promise he had made at the airport when she squeezed his hand so hard it felt like she'd never let go. Jack stopped at Emily's house, a modest one-story cottage on the edge of town, with a faded blue fence and pots of flowers she loved. He had imagined this moment hundreds of times. He would knock, she'd throw herself into his arms, and they'd finally talk about everything he'd written in those letters she had surely read. But when the door opened, it wasn't Emily standing there, it was an unfamiliar man. Tall, expensive shirt, clean-shaven, with a look that said, "This is my house." "Who are you?" The man frowned, scanning Jack from head to toe like he was a stray who'd wandered in. "Jack Riley. I'm looking for Emily." Jack's voice was hoarse, but steady. He tightened his grip on the duffel strap to keep his hands from shaking. The man grimaced like he'd heard something unpleasant. "Emily? She's busy. What do you want?" I'm her fiancé. Jack stepped forward, his tone turning sharp. Where is she? The man laughed, dry as a Texas wind. Fiancé, son, you're late. Emily is my wife. The words hit like a bullet. Air rushed from Jack's lungs. The ground tilted. He wanted to speak, but his tongue stuck. Then Emily stepped out. The chestnut braid, the green eyes, everything as he remembered, but the look on her face was foreign. She looked shocked, like she'd seen a ghost. Jack, her voice trembled, but there was no joy in it, only shock. You're alive? Alive? Jack barely contained the anger rising in his chest. And you, I see, didn't waste any time. Emily flinched like he'd struck her. The man Jack now noticed the ring on his finger moved between them. Listen, soldier, don't start. You disappeared. She moved on. It happens. Disappeared? Jack stepped closer. His eyes burned. I wrote you, Emily. Every day. You didn't get a single letter? Emily shook her head, eyes filling. No, Jack. Not one. They told me. She glanced at the man Trevor, as Jack learned later. They told me you were missing. The military sent a letter. I thought you were dead. Dead? Jack felt anger mix with confusion. Who told you that? I wrote hundreds of letters. I gave them to Lawson. He promised to send them. Trevor folded his arms. His tone turned hard. Listen, hero, don't spin fairy tales. You were gone. She cried for months. Now she has a life. Leave before I call the cops. Trevor, stop. Emily grabbed his hand, but her eyes stayed on Jack. I didn't know, Jack. I would have waited if I'd known. Then why didn't you write? Jack almost shouted, his voice shaking with hurt and fury. I waited for you, Emily. In that hell where every day could be the last, I waited for your words. I did write, she raised her voice. Anger flashed in her eyes. I sent letters every week. They came back marked addressee unknown. I thought you were gone, Jack. Do you understand what that did to me? They stood a few feet apart, separated by years of hurt. Trevor snorted, but stayed quiet this time, shooting Jack a look of contempt. Jack felt his fists clench, but he held back. He didn't want to fight. Not here, not in front of Emily. Show me the letter, he said, forcing his voice to steady. The one that said I was missing. Emily nodded and disappeared inside. Trevor stayed, drilling Jack with a stare. You think you can just come back and fix everything? She's my wife, soldier. Go back to your war. I'm not fighting you, Jack shot back, but I am going to find out what happened to my letters. Emily returned with a yellowed envelope bearing a military mail seal. She handed it to Jack, her fingers trembling. Here. Jack tore it open and scanned the text. The letter was short, official. Dear Miss Emily Clark, we regret to inform you that Private Jack Riley is considered missing in action following an operation in the Al Raqqa sector. Details are classified. The signature was a scrawl, but the seal looked real. Blood hammered in Jack's temples. He hadn't been missing. He had been there in hell, writing to her every day, handing his letters to Lawson. This is a lie, he said quietly, steel under his voice. I was not missing. I was alive. And I wrote to you. Emily covered her mouth, eyes shining with tears. Jack, I didn't know. I would never. Enough. Trevor stepped forward, his voice turning coarse. You said your piece, now get out. She isn't yours. Leave, hero, go chase your truth somewhere else. Jack looked at him, and for a second it seemed he might swing. Instead, he crushed the letter in his hand and stepped back. I'll find out who did this, Emily, and why. He turned and walked away without looking back. Austin's streets vibrated around him, music from bars, people laughing, cars in motion. For Jack, it was just background noise. His mind roared with questions. Someone had lied. Someone had stolen his letters, his chance, his love. And that someone was tied to Lawson. Jack was sure of it. The Austin sun didn't scorch like the deserts, but Jack felt it baking out the last drops of calm. He sat in an old pickup parked outside a veterans center on the city's edge. The building was gray and faceless, an American flag faded and flapping in the light breeze. Inside smelled of coffee, paper, and someone's forgotten life. In his pocket, Jack clenched the yellowed military letter, the one that flipped his world, declaring him missing in action. His fingers kneaded the paper as if he could wring the truth from it. After seeing Emily and her new husband, Trevor, Jack couldn't sit idle. Something was wrong, not just with the letters, but with everything that had once held his life together. The center buzzed with quiet conversations. Someone filled out benefits forms, someone waited for a counselor, someone just stared into space the way Jack had in that tent. He went to the desk, where a middle-aged woman with tired eyes wore a badge, Mary Ann, administrator. "I need to check military mail," Jack said, keeping his voice as calm as he could while anger boiled inside. "Letters I sent from the Al Raqqa base. They never arrived." Mary Ann raised a brow, nudging her glasses down her nose. "Letters? Soldier, this isn't Santa's post office. Military mail is chaos, especially where you were. What exactly are you looking for?" "My letters," Jack leaned closer, his voice turning firmer. "I wrote every day. Not one got through, and I got a letter saying I was missing, even though I was alive. I want to know why." She sighed like she'd heard it 100 times. "All right, let's check. Name, rank, service period." Jack gave the details, and Mary Ann began tapping the keyboard, her fingers moving slowly to his irritation. While she searched, Jack looked around. In a corner sat an old vet with a beard like gray moss, muttering to himself. Jack recognized that look the war left it in the eyes of everyone who came back. "Nothing." Mary Ann leaned back. "No records of your letters, but there is something interesting. Your file is tagged restricted access." "That's not nothing, kid. Someone didn't want your data floating around." "Restricted access?" Jack felt his pulse jump. "Who could do that?" "Someone with higher rank," she shrugged. "Maybe your commander. But I'm not a cop. Go to the archives at Fort Hood. They keep everything tied to mail from your base." Jack nodded, his head buzzing. Restricted access. Lawson. The letters he'd handed over, letters that never reached Emily. He thanked Mary Ann and left, anger wrestling with confusion. Fort Hood was a few hours' drive. Jack pushed the pickup down the highway past fields and gas stations, where locals drank beer and argued football. His mind was far away in the desert, in that tent where Lawson took his letters with that cold stare. The Fort Hood archives turned out to be a gray maze smelling of old paper and metal. A brawny guard with an eagle tattoo on his forearm waved Jack through after checking his papers. Inside, a thin clerk with a receding hairline, Kevin, greeted him. He looked like he hated his job, but Jack wasn't turning back. "I need records for mail out of Al Raqqa base, year 2023, Jack said, planting his hands on the counter. "My letters, Private Jack Riley." Kevin rolled his eyes. "Buddy, there are millions of papers. You think I'm going to dig through all this for your love notes?" Jack clenched his fists, then forced himself to breathe. "They're not just notes. I was marked missing while I was alive. My letters never got through. I want to know why." Kevin glanced up, curiosity stirring. "Missing? That's serious. Fine, let's look. But if there's nothing, don't give me a hard time." They went into the stacks, shelves sagging under boxes. After an hour, Kevin sighed. "Nothing, Riley. Not a single letter of yours. But," he paused, scanning a folder, "there's something odd. Mail from your base routed through Captain Lawson. All of it. And some are flagged, held for review." "Held?" Blood pounded in Jack's skull. "By who? For what?" "No idea," Kevin shrugged. "But here's a reference to a lockbox. Lawson kept some letters in a personal deposit. Don't ask me why. I'm just the clerk." Jack barely resisted slamming the table. "Where's the box?" "In Dallas, Military Depot. You'll need authorization. Or connections." Jack headed back to Austin with no peace in him. At a motel, he found an old buddy, Mike, now a bar bouncer. Big, scar-cheeked, Mike drank beer and listened, nodding along. Lawson, Mike spat on the floor. That guy was slick. Remember how he chewed us out for nothing but dodged patrols himself? Heard he had ties upstairs. Something about information control. Information control? Jack leaned in. What do you mean? Heard he screened letters. Not just yours. Said it was for security, but I think he liked the power. Or he was covering for someone. You know how it is, war hides a lot of dirt. You heard about her dad. Whose? Emily's? Jack frowned. He's some kind of professor, I think. Not just a professor. Mike lowered his voice. He's an activist. Wrote anti-war pieces, organized protests. His name showed up on blacklists. Lawson could have known. Maybe he decided Emily was a problem. Jack felt something tighten inside. Emily a problem? Because of her father? It sounded crazy, but the puzzle was snapping into place. Lawson, the letters, the missing in action notice. Jack stood and tossed some bills on the table. Thanks, Mike. I'm going to find that lockbox. Be careful, Mike called after him. Lawson's not the kind who likes people digging under him. That night, Jack lay on the motel bed staring at the ceiling. He thought of Emily, her tears, Trevor standing between them like a wall. Mostly, he thought of Lawson. The suburb he reached after the long drive from Austin was quiet, manicured lawns and homes that smelled like the kind of peace Jack no longer remembered. He stood before Lawson's house, a two-story cottage with white walls and red tile roof, like a picture from a family life ad. To Jack, it was a trap, hiding the truth about his stolen life. His heart hammered, his fists balled inside the pockets of his old army jacket. He hadn't come just to talk. He'd come for answers. Jack knocked. The sound boomed in the silence like a shot. A man in civvies' open jeans, open collar shirt, but Jack knew him instantly. Lawson. The same cold stare, the same sharp features, now without the uniform. A shadow crossed his eyes, not fear, but wariness. Riley. Lawson didn't look surprised, his voice low like an engine's growl. What do you want? We need to talk, Jack stepped in without waiting. About my letters, and why I was missing in action. Lawson grimaced, but stepped aside. Inside, the house was too clean, as if nobody really lived there. Photos on the wall. Lawson in uniform, Lawson with medals, Lawson with a woman, but no life in the frames. Anger rose in Jack's chest. He tamped it down and sat on a couch that creaked under him. Coffee? Beer? Lawson stood by the kitchen island, hands in his pockets, trying to look casual. I don't give a damn about your coffee, Jack snapped, voice sharp as a razor. Where are my letters, Lawson? Why didn't they reach Emily? Lawson sighed and sat opposite, hands on his knees. His gaze was calm but coiled, like a predator waiting to strike. What are you talking about, Riley? War zone mail is a crapshoot. You know that. Don't play me, Jack leaned forward, eyes blazing. I was at Fort Hood. Your logs, your lockbox. My letters never left the base. And that missing in action note, you knew I was alive. Why? Lawson drummed his fingers on the table. Heavy silence, like the moment before a blast. Finally, he spoke, quieter, firmer. You think war is just gunfire? There are things you don't understand, kid. Decisions made by people who aren't you. What decisions? Jack slammed a fist on the table. A glass clinked. You stole my letters. You wrecked my life. Emily thinks I'm dead because you decided to play God. Lawson didn't flinch, but his eyes narrowed. Watch your mouth, Riley. You're not on base, but I can still put you on your back. Try it, Jack stood, his knuckles whitened. But first tell me why you hid my letters. What did I do to you? Not you, Riley. Your girl, Emily Clark. Lawson leaned back, a thin smile cutting his face. Her daddy isn't some Shakespeare professor. He was a problem. Wrote pieces, organized rallies, dumped on our mission. His name was on lists. And you, genius, wrote her every day, talking about the base, about operations. You want me to believe that's safe? Jack's stomach dropped. You read my letters? His voice shook, not with fear but rage. You dug through my words to her? There was nothing operational in them, just me trying to make it back. Maybe so, Lawson shrugged, voice cold as steel. I couldn't risk it. Orders were clear. Anything tied to the Clarks was to be monitored. Your letters could go places, or she could pass them to Daddy. Jack barely kept from grabbing Lawson by the throat. Orders? From who? You torched my life over an order? She married someone else because she thought I was dead. Lawson stood, posture snapping straight. You think it was easy? I did my job, Riley. War isn't about your damn love letters. It's about control. And if you think I decided it alone, you're even dumber than you look. Who? Jack stepped closer, voice a low growl. Who gave the order? Name. Lawson's smile turned poisonous. You want to play detective? Fine, dig. But be careful. Some people don't like noses in their business. They're not as nice as I am. Blood hammered in Jack's head. He wanted to smash that smug face, but something in Lawson's stare stopped him. Not fear or warning. Lawson knew more than he'd said, and that more was dangerous. You took everything I had, Jack said quietly, each word a stone. I'll find out who's behind you. Lawson turned his back, as if the talk were over. Go home, Riley. Forget it. You're alive. That's enough. Jack didn't answer. He left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the glass. The Dallas night was warm, but he shook as if cold. Lawson's words spun in his head. Orders were clear. Someone higher up. Someone who marked Emily as a threat because of her father. But why, and how far did it go? He sat in the pickup, but didn't start the engine. Jack Riley stood by the old bridge over Lake Travis, where he and Emily once walked hand in hand and laughed like the war was just a bad movie plot. The lake threw back the moonlight, but to Jack it looked dull as his hope. In his pocket lay a letter, the last he'd written to Emily but hadn't dared mail. After confronting Lawson in Dallas, Jack returned to Austin not with a victory, but with a truth heavier than any rifle he carried in the desert. He arranged to meet Emily at a small cafe nearby, a place with a faded sign and the smell of fresh coffee cutting through the night's humidity. Jack sat in a corner booth, clutching a glass of whiskey he'd ordered but wasn't drinking. His fingers trembled as he thought about what to say. The truth about the letters, about Lawson, about the scheme that stole their future sat on his tongue. But would it change anything? Emily walked in, and her silhouette in the doorway clenched his heart. She wore a simple dress, no makeup, her braid over one shoulder, but the warmth he remembered was gone from her eyes. You came. Jack stood but didn't step closer. His voice was rough, as if after a long silence. You asked. Emily sat across from him, hands on the table, fingers worrying the edge of a napkin. What do you want, Jack? I thought we said it all. Not all. He leaned forward, gaze tight but not aggressive. I know why you didn't get my letters, and why they told you I was dead. Emily flinched, eyes narrowing. You already said military mail chaos. I don't want to hear it again. It wasn't the mail. Jack tapped the table, holding back anger. It was Lawson, my captain. He hid my letters because of your father. My father? Her voice turned sharp, almost hostile. What does he have to do with this? Jack exhaled, trying to pick words that wouldn't rip everything apart. Your dad wrote against the war. They marked him a threat. Lawson got orders to monitor anything connected to your family. My letters, they never went through because he feared I might write something that would reach him. Then they lied to you, said I was missing. Emily stared, pain and distrust warring in her eyes. You're saying my letters to you, they intercepted those too? Probably. Jack dropped his gaze. I didn't get a single one, and I thought you'd left me. Silence pooled thick as tar. Emily pressed her lips together. She twisted the napkin until it tore. Do you have any idea what I went through? Her voice trembled, but a steel edge ran through it. I cried at night, Jack. I thought you were dead. Then you show up and blame me. You think I just forgot you. I'm not blaming you. Jack raised his hands as if to ward off a blow. But damn it, Emily, I wrote every day. I held on to you while everything burned, and you married Trevor without finding out if I was alive. Don't you dare, she slapped the table, heads turned. You weren't here, Jack. You didn't see me fall apart. Trevor was there, he picked up the pieces. You were a ghost. Jack felt her words cut like shrapnel. He wanted to shout, but he held it, his voice dropping heavy. I wasn't a ghost. I was in hell, and writing kept me sane. Lawson stole that. And not just Lawson. Someone above him. Emily shook her head, eyes glittering with tears she refused to shed. And now what? You want me to drop everything and run to you? You think it's that simple? I'm not asking you to leave him. Jack clenched his fists to stop the trembling. I want you to know the truth, and I want the ones who did this to answer for it. Answer? She gave a bitter, breathy laugh. You're up against the army, Jack. Against people with power. You think you'll touch them? They'll chew you up. He didn't speak right away. She wasn't wrong, and the truth stung. Jack pulled a photo from his pocket, the one of Emily laughing by the lake. I don't know if I can get you back, but I can't live knowing they stole our chance. Emily looked at the photo. For a moment her face softened. Then she looked away. I'm sorry, Jack. I can't go back. I chose a life. You should too. She stood, her steps toward the door quick, like she was fleeing. Jack didn't stop her. He stared at the untouched whiskey and listened as her footsteps faded into the night. Later, wandering Austin's streets, Jack ducked into a bar where he met Mike again. Nursing a beer, Mike told him what Jack dreaded. Lawson had been promoted after the war. Now he was in Washington, with a new medal and a spotless record. That bastard came out clean, Mike spat. And you, brother, are walking into fire. They protect their own. They always do. In the motel, as the night deepened, a letter lay on the table, the one Jack had written to Emily. I know the truth, but it won't bring you back. I'm sorry I couldn't reach you sooner. He stared at the page, but didn't send it. Instead, he tucked it into his pocket with the photo. He faced a choice. Forget, like Emily urged, or keep digging and risk everything. Lawson was only a link. Behind him stood shadows, people with power who thought they could play God with other people's lives. Jack stood and looked out the window. Austin slept, but for him this night was a beginning. He didn't know if he would win or if the truth was worth his life. He only knew he wouldn't stop. The shadows that stole his love would hear his footsteps soon.